airfields that the MiGs would have flown from?
We don't know.
And what will the U.S. do if Russia uses a chemical weapon in Ukraine?
Well, I don't want to get into speculating. I think you heard the president very clearly today say that there would be severe consequences for Russia should that happen, and I don't think it'd be helpful for me to go beyond that right now from the Defense Department. Court.
Two things. Do you have any indications that those attacks on the airfields in the West could have been because any foreign military equipment or anything has been flowing through there and they were trying to target?
I'm not going to speak for Russian targeting procedures here, Court. What we know, those airfields will hit. Exactly why and what was in the Russian mindset, it's difficult for us to know. And
then can you update on two things? One, have there been any developments or changes on the nuclear front? Like, are you seeing any indications that Russia may be considering planning for the use of a tactical nuclear weapon? And then on the chemical biological weapons, are there any indications that they've been bringing any of those into Ukraine or into the area to potentially prepare to use?
So on the nuclear stuff, again, I want to be very careful here in talking about intelligence assessments. I would just say, and this is something we look at every day, that we are confident in the strategic deterrent posture that we have in place in order to defend the homeland, our allies, and our partners. I would not speak to anything specific on the Russian side. I would just tell you that that we've seen nothing that gives us cause or reason to change our deterrent posture at this time. I think that's really about as far as I can go. On the chem bio thing, again, I don't want to get into intelligence assessments. We're watching this as closely as we can. I don't have anything to report with respect to specific Russian chem bio capabilities inside Ukraine. I would only say two things, Court. One, this is a country that has a reputation for using those kinds of weapons on people, and we know they have a program. And two, we continue to watch for the potential, and I want to stress the word potential that they could be banging this drum with the intent of creating some sort of false flag event that they could use it as an excuse to escalate the conflict even more. Again, we're watching this every day. I don't have any specific indication now to talk about, but it is something we're concerned about. You might have heard President Zelensky in his nightly address last night say that exact thing, that you got to be careful what you see the Russians accuse others of, because it oftentimes ends up being what they're planning to do. Now, again, that's we don't have firm indications right now. It's just something that could happen that we want to watch out for. Yep, Tara.
Thanks, John. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense reported earlier today that Russia launched 2 airstrikes inside Belarus, potentially to try and drag Belarus into the war. Can the Pentagon confirm this? And has there been any outreach or attempt to try and keep Belarus out of the war? You've mentioned, or there have been missiles launched from within Belarus into Ukraine already.
Yeah, we can't confirm these reports. Seeing the open source reporting on it, Tara, but we have nothing to corroborate that. And I would just tell you that we haven't seen any indications that Belarusian troops or forces have moved inside Ukraine. We did note that the president of Belarus made comments the other day through state media that he felt it was important for Belarusian forces to come to the defense of the rear of Russian forces should they be attacked, the supply line route, if you will. That's the first time that he's ever said anything about Belarus perhaps getting involved, but no indications at this time that they have or that that's in the offing.
And then separate topic. As these sanctions have gone into effect, you've started to see global food prices spike, and there's concerns that this could raise additional risk of conflict in countries that are already facing hunger, such as Afghanistan, and likewise. Is the DoD looking at this? Is there a greater risk of global conflict because it'll become that much harder to feed people in that already face great food insecurity?
The administration is obviously looking at the humanitarian crisis that this war of choice is causing, and exploring. Excuse me. Let me try that again with English. Exploring lots of opportunities to work inside the international community to alleviate that. I know of no plans in DoD to augment or to prevent or to subside the effects of food insecurity. So I don't have any DoD role here to speak to, but I do want to just pivot off, one thing you had in your question, which was this risk of escalation, and obviously that is something that we're constantly concerned about, the risk of this conflict escalating beyond what it already is, and is already dangerous enough inside Ukraine. So, to Court's questions about the things we're looking at and what we're monitoring, we're constantly concerned about the potential escalation here.
I guess the question is just the overall trickle-down effects. You have this conflict inside Ukraine that is having already global ripple effects, and whether or not the Pentagon is taking a broader view of already hot zones, conflict zones, and if this will make it worse because hunger becomes worse, access to food becomes worse.
Yeah, again, we haven't seen any. I get where the question's going. Oftentimes when you have instability in one area, it can bleed over to others, either in that region or without. And I understand that. I would tell you, broadly speaking, we're constantly looking at threats and challenges around the world, and we're not unmindful of the fact that threats and challenges do spill over and can cause instability and therefore insecurity in places that aren't the origin of the conflict. So we're obviously taking a global view. We do that every day. We're certainly doing that in light of what's going on in Ukraine. I don't know. Well, let me put it another way. We haven't seen any specific indications that that there are going to be any imminent insecurity issues, challenges, threats in other regions as a result of this that we're going to have to address. I think that's what you were trying to get at, and I just think it's too soon to know that right now, too soon to tell. But obviously, we're watching clearly because of the potential for escalation here. And I just want to say, if I can again, it's a war of choice. Mr. Putin can stop this war right now by agreeing to a diplomatic solution, or at least just stopping the bombing and the death and the destruction that he is causing against a nation that provoked nobody, against a nation that presented no threat to Russia. All of this is by his choice, and all that blood is on his hands, and he could stop it right now if he wanted to.
John, there is a discussion that some NATO allies might send their S-300s to Ukraine. Is the U.S. involved in any of these discussions, and will the U.S. give a green light should some allies move forward with that?
I have talked before that sovereign nations are making decisions for themselves about how to help Ukraine, and we respect those sovereign decisions. It's not about the United States giving green lights or having vetoes here. What I will tell you, and I said this the other day, we are working with allies and partners to help get the kinds of capabilities that we know that Ukrainians need and are using very well inside Ukraine, get more of that stuff to them. Some of that material we have and we are providing. Some of that material we don't have, but we know others have, and we're helping coordinate that as well. And that security assistance is flowing, even in just the last 24 hours. I'm not going to talk about individual systems. You know that. I haven't done that yet, and I'm not going to start today. But we are working hard to canvass other allies and partners that we know could possibly help. And it's really up to those nations, Qasim, to make these decisions and then to speak to them. If they want to speak to them, they can do that, and we have to respect that. What's important, and what I don't want you to walk away not understanding, is that we're having these conversations actively. We are helping coordinate the assistance as best we can, and we're going to continue to talk to the Ukrainians about what they need to better defend themselves. Okay?
Another question. We have seen the U.S. Patriot batteries along the Poland's border with Ukraine. I know you won't get into details, but can you tell us if the rules of engagement have changed since the war began in that part of the world?
We don't talk about rules of engagement. David?
A couple questions. Can you update us on any uses of the deconfliction line? And has Secretary Austin attempted to communicate with his counterpart, the Russian defense minister? And you just said you are helping coordinate assistance. Does that include providing airlift from donor countries to transshipment points?
On the deconfliction line, David, no specific interactions to speak to. In other words, no content has been needed, but we do test it once or twice a day, and that continues. And thus far, with maybe only a couple of exceptions, the Russians have picked up on the other end, and we know that they know what the ringtone is, and they'll pick up and answer, and so we know it's functional. I have no conversations between Secretary Austin and Minister Shoigu to speak to, and I have no expectation that that's going to change anytime soon. And then on the helping coordinate, I really don't want to get into too much detail here. I think the coordination is in two planes. One, it's in the conversations with allies and partners about these capabilities and their willingness to provide. And then on another plane, it's about helping with the logistics. And it really varies from country to country and capability to capability. But we are trying to help with that coordination function, and the Brits have been too. In fact, they've been very vocal about their efforts to help coordinate and work through that, and we're grateful for their assistance. Jim?
Two questions, really. The Russians have occupied a lot of area in Ukraine. Do you know if the Ukrainians, is there any assessment if they've gone into like a guerrilla war in these occupied areas? And a separate question, I imagine the Russians have to have captured Ukrainian service members. Are they treating those service members as captured POWs with Geneva Convention protections?
I don't have any information about captured soldiers on either side. I really don't, and I certainly couldn't get into how they're being treated. I mean, obviously, we're not involved in this war, but our expectation would be that both parties would abide by Geneva Convention requirements and to treat any soldiers that are captured humanely and in accordance with the rule of law. That would be the United States expectation, as well as so many other nations. But I don't have any information about what that looks like in terms of numbers and what that treatment actually is. And on your question about guerrilla tactics, Jim, I'd let the Ukrainians describe for themselves the manner in which they're fighting, but they are fighting, and they're fighting skillfully, bravely, quite creatively, and the fighting isn't just by their armed forces. I mean, average citizens. You've seen it for yourself, picking up arms, getting arms given to them by the government and learning how to use them and using them. And some of the resistance has been nonviolent. You've seen it for yourself, where crowds of Ukrainians blocking city streets and actually stopping in their tracks some Russian units. So the resistance resides on many levels, and it's quite inspiring. Whether you'd call that guerrilla tactics or not, I don't know, and I don't even know if that's worth having that debate over. They are resisting, they are defending, and we are going to continue to look for ways to help them do that better going forward. Barb?
Can I divert for just a minute to a North Korea question? Can you, now that several parts of the administration have talked about your public announcement Can you tell us why the Pentagon, Indo-PACOM, but essentially the Pentagon, decided to take the seemingly unprecedented step of making a public statement to being sure the North Koreans would see it, that you were going to increase intelligence collection against them on their ICBM program? Why would you make that public statement letting the North Koreans know you're going to increase your collection of classified intelligence? What is the state of your current concern about how close they are to an ICBM? And is this disclosure, this candor about a potential adversary, is this potentially a lesson learned from the Russia situation? Put everything you know out there as hoping it will be a deterrent.
Who just did?
That was me, sorry.
But then I have one other brief topic.
Of course you do. All right, there's a lot there. Look, I think I said it in my statement. We made these revelations public. We announced some of the additional ISR and enhanced readiness we were taking because we believe it's important to call out the behavior that we've been seeing, particularly in the last few weeks. And that we believe it's important for the entire international community to speak with one voice about the concerns that we know they have over the DPRK's continued ballistic missile program. I'm not going to get into any more detail in terms of the assessments we've made. It's all there out in the public. I won't go beyond my public statements, but clearly these continued tests are a provocation. They are a violation of UN Security Council resolutions, and they give us, as well as so many other nations, added concern about the kinds of capabilities that the North is trying to develop. And so, again, we feel it was important to make that case and to lay it out there. And as for whether it's a lesson learned, I would be careful drawing a direct, bright line between these revelations about this program and revelations that we made early on, even before the invasion of Ukraine. When we believe that information should be in the public, we're going to put it in the public. We're going to state it as best we can. Now, obviously, there's some stuff we know that we're not going to talk about, but we believe that calling them out publicly for these tests was the right thing to do.
I want to ask one follow-up quickly on the deconfliction line. Two things. I take it they have never called the United States. It's all been you calling them. Is that right?
To my knowledge, it has been us using it to check in once or twice a day.
With them. Okay. And you said that they know your ringtone. So can you tell us what ringtone the U.S. selected?
It was a poor attempt at being. It was a poor attempt at humor. I did not mean that we have an exact ringtone here. Just that we know they know how to use the system.
Thank you.
Yeah.
John, you mentioned the Secretary's upcoming trip to NATO. What kind of things is he going to be discussing with the NATO partners? And we have been talking about the NATO response force being activated and that potentially some U.S. forces would be dedicated to it. What is the current count of how many U.S. personnel are actively participating in the NATO response force?
Again, we're still working that through with NATO. What the response force would look like, be composed of, where it would go. So I don't have any sourced requirements to speak to today. I'm sorry, you had another question.
Yeah, what about what exactly is going to be the tone of these meetings that he's going to have with his counterparts in Brussels next week? I mean, or what are they actively seeking?
I think this second defense ministerial now, in light of this issue, comes at a critical time here. 2 weeks out will be more likely 3 weeks into this conflict, and I don't know what things are going to look like next week, but obviously we can expect the defense ministers to talk seriously about what NATO is doing to better shore up its defenses, and making sure that we all have a common sight picture of the threat environment and what needs to be done, again, to meet our Article 5 commitments.
So there's no, like, is there an agenda is there something specifically that tops the agenda with regards to Ukraine?
I would let NATO and the Secretary General speak to it's his defense ministerial. I don't want to get ahead of his agenda. That's really for him to speak to. The Secretary is pleased to be able to go in person and be there to meet with other defense ministers, whoever is going to be there. And we know that there's a lot to talk about. I mean, there's an awful lot going on inside the alliance. The alliance is more relevant than ever. It's more united than ever. It's certainly a more viable alliance than it's ever been. Again, there's going to be a lot of material to go through, both in terms of what we're seeing happen in Ukraine and the effect that needs to have on the alliance going forward, including the application of the NATO response force and what that looks like, where and who and when. All that we expect will be discussed. In the back there.
Okay, thank you. I want to follow up about North Korea. The Indo-PACOM increased the readiness among the missile defense forces in the region earlier this week. So could you tell us a sense of what steps the Indo-PACOM has taken since then? What has changed before and after this new direction?
What has changed is we've increased ISR coverage in the Yellow Sea, and the Indo-PACOM has increased their ballistic missile defense readiness, and I think you can understand why we wouldn't detail every bit of that effort. Okay? Yeah. In the back there.
On cold response, which you briefed on Wednesday, the Russians told the Norwegians, I think last week, that they wouldn't send observers to exercise. And we've already seen Russian jets fly over Swedish territory in the Baltic Sea. So are the forces involved in cold response on guard or wary about any attempted provocations or other interference?
Look, we always take force protection at a premium here. It's always a factor. It is an exercise. And here's the deal. We actually announced it. In fact, we've been talking about the preps for it for quite some time. It's a defensive exercise. I stood up here the other day and walked through all the capabilities that we're going to be training to and what those Marines and sailors are up to. We'll continue to be as transparent about the exercise as possible. There's no reason for anyone to view this as some kind of threat. Therefore, there'd be no reason for anyone, including the Russians, to threaten it. But obviously, force protection is always a paramount concern. We don't anticipate that this time that there would be a specific threat to the exercise.
And a few minutes ago, you mentioned that you don't talk about the specifics of the security assistance, but obviously a lot of that assistance is being publicized. There's mention of javelins, obviously, but also some of stingers. So I just wondered, as kind of background, could you talk about the decision process there, about what the Pentagon does and doesn't disclose about its security systems?
We have been very consistent since before Mr. Putin decided to launch a war on Ukraine that we were going to help Ukraine with the capabilities that it needs to defend itself and that we weren't going to get into a shopping list. I haven't done that yet, and I'm not going to start today. I think you can understand why we don't believe it's helpful for the Ukrainians to have us publicize and put out in great detail the kinds of capabilities that we're getting into their hands. If they want to speak to what they have and what they're using, that's certainly their right, but we aren't going to violate that little bit of OPSEC for them. That wouldn't be the right thing to do. It's a prudent we always worry about our own operational security. In this case, we also want to observe Ukrainian operational security. Paul Shinkman from U.S. News.
Yeah, hi, John. One question to follow up on Belarus. So the Ukrainian government or officials in Ukraine have also warned about a pending invasion by Belarusian forces as soon as this afternoon. So you said that there was no indication that they were moving in response to real or imagined attacks on their territory, but do you have any response to those claims from the Ukrainian officials?
I haven't seen those Ukrainian reports. I can only tell you what we're seeing, and we're not tracking any imminent involvement by Belarusian forces. That's not to say that it couldn't happen, or that it wouldn't happen, or that they could get involved in a way that maybe we didn't see. But I can just tell you what we're seeing right now.
Other Ukrainian officials claimed this morning that Ukrainian forces had killed a third Russian general in the ongoing conflict. Can you confirm whether that has taken place and any observations about what that indicates about the Russian offensive?
I can't confirm those reports, Paul. Tony Capaccio.
John, did you just call me?
I did, Tony.
Okay, sorry. Hey, sorry, I missed that. Two questions: one budget question and one air defense question. The president is about to sign this $13.5 trillion package. Excuse me, the $1.5 trillion package. Within that is $3.5 billion for Ukraine defensive equipment. $3 billion of that is going to be new equipment to the Ukraine. How quickly will the Pentagon be able to send over this new tranche of equipment?
Yeah, I'm not going to get ahead of that process right now, Tony. I would just tell you, as we've said before, I mean, we're still delivering assistance on the last drawdown package that the president signed, the $350 million. We're still delivering, as a matter of fact, even in just the last 24 hours and in the next 24 hours. And obviously we will, as I've said before, we will continue to provide security assistance to the Ukrainians for as long as we can, as fast as we can, and that would certainly include under the authorities and funding that would be provided by this spending bill when the president signs it. He's indicated that he's going to sign it, and obviously, broadly speaking, we're grateful that to be able to have an appropriations bill signed into law and not have to live under the threat of yet more continuing resolutions. Anything more in the room? Okay, that'll close us out today. Thank you very much.